when they speak. So can I please have a previous president of ICAP, the past president in fact, Mr. Muhammad Ali Latif Saab on stage, and also Mr. Zishan Ijaz, who is the vice president ICAP currently. All right, once these two gentlemen are on stage, I'd like to invite to receive their mementos. Okay, I'm going to do the ladies first thing. Can I please have Ms. Amna Zaidi, our transformation specialist, on the stage to receive her token of appreciation? Being a panelist and all that, ma'am? Can we please have Ms. Amna's? Yes, thank you. Oh no, Ms. Amna ke koi dost nahi hai audience mein. Come on, Islamabad and Karachi and Lahore. I promise after the next dialogue, जो कि बहुत interesting है, I'm going to send you off to have some chai, shai, samosa, shamosa, etc. Thank you so much, Ms. Amna. Next up, I'd like to invite to the stage Mr. Amin Rajput, our Deputy Managing Director of Swiss Southern Gas Company, for being an integral part of our panel. Big smiles all around, paparazzi time over. Thank you so much to my guests on the stage. हो गए smiling shots मिल गए आपको बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया gentlemen. I have apparently 5 minutes behind schedule, which according to Pakistani Standard Time was not so bad, so I think I'm doing all right. So I like the format of today because it's not just one person coming on doing a presentation, completely not into the fact whether someone's listening or not. What's great is we're doing fireside chats, we're doing panel discussions, and we're having dialogues. So no monologues today, no sir, no. Our next presentation and dialogue is about curating or creating a competitive environment through privatization, pros, cons, how-tos, and everything in between. So I'm going to do a little bit of a switcheroo here and call our presenter first, not our moderator, because first there's a short presentation and then we're going to be opening the floor to moderation and then of course a dialogue. I'd like to invite to the stage to talk about this theme of reorganization, of building business synergies with the focus on the potential impacts of privatization. And for this, I'd like to invite to the stage Mr. Salman Amin, Member, Competition Commission of Pakistan, Government of Pakistan. So Salman Saab is a fellow CA and he has done some major certifications in regulatory affairs from the University of Florida in USA. In the Privatization Commission of Pakistan, he was looking after the energy portfolio and he dealt with matters of merger and acquisition and due diligence of various entities, including obviously their restructuring. इस बारे में उन्होंने एक पेपर भी प्रेजेंट किया था on behalf of Pakistan in the annual development conference at the ADB headquarters in Manila way back in 2017. So Mr. Salman Amin, can I please have you on stage?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Distinguished President ICAP, Council members ICAP, members of ICAP, and other ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning. This is indeed a pleasure to present this in this event, which is very important event in ICAP's calendar. And a special thanks to the Vice President, Mr. Zishan Ijaz, who was ensuring and insisting on this session, on this agenda item to be included. And why not? Obviously, privatization is on the priority agenda of the economic team right now. So this session and session after this would be talking about the privatization and investment. So thanks a lot, Zishan Sahab. It's always an honor to be here at this ICAP forum. This is our forum, your forum. So I would like to, be quick with my presentation because we have got two separate components followed by this panel discussion. So this would be the scheme of the presentation. I would be talking about these core aspects, starting from the legal framework, then a brief snap of what we have been doing in Pakistan when it comes to privatization, the privatization cycle itself, what is right now on the active list of privatization, and then we would be talking only about the discourse, because discourse is the most talked about item when it comes to the privatization. Then linking the two different laws when it comes to the competition law, privatization, and how to handle the monopolies when you're talking about the privatization. And then recommendations. Recommendations would be all based on what lessons we have learned over here. So this is not something we are going to tell from what other we have experiences in X or Y country. We would be talking about what our lessons have taught us. Next, please. Primarily, these are the three laws which deal with the transactions of an SOE. First is the Privatization Commission Ordinance. It provides a fair and transparent process for privatization. Proceeds are to be used for retiring federal government debt and poverty alleviation. 90% of the proceeds go towards the federal government debt retirement and 10% for the poverty alleviation. The second one is the P3 Act 2017. It deals with the promotion of private investment in infrastructure, ensure appropriate regulatory controls, and enable resolution of contract disputes. The third one, which is the most recent one, that came in November 2022, is the Intergovernmental Commercial Transaction Act, or in simple word, G2G Act. It is talking about to facilitate G2G economic and commercial transaction, and it is an overriding law. If you go to the previous slide, please. Here I would like to identify that, when you're talking about P3 or, privatization, people have got views on both. Few are in the favor of privatization, few prefer P3, and then we have got a very powerful act. But P3 has got own pros and cons, because privatization we have been dealing for quite a long while, but P3 has got its own challenges. That's why if you see in that, there's mentioning in the bullet number 3 that enable resolution of contract disputes. When you get into a P3, you have to have a profit sharing matrix, you have to have a risk sharing matrix on investment metrics, and normally and globally what we have seen is P3 has to be carefully designed, and when you prefer P3 over privatization, you have to be very careful why you are preferring P3 over privatization, or why privatization is not being considered and P3 is being supported. So it depends upon the sector, and it depends upon what exactly the entity we are talking about. The last one, this is the most powerful act, I can tell you. The reason being, it has got all the immunities. It has saying overriding law. The section 10 of this law says that, it has clearly mentioned that this law overrides PC ordinance, it overrides P3 Act, SECP Act, Companies Act, PPRA ordinance, and any other law which could, for that matter, could have a problem in that G2G transaction. So this is the most powerful act right now we have when it comes to the transaction. Interestingly, Privatization Commission Board has recently passed a regulation where they have tried to bridge the first one, PC ordinance, with the G2G Act. I'm not going to get into the detail due to the time factor, but the legal fraternity has real reservation that you can't be innovative when it comes to the legislation. But anyhow, that is something also to be in your knowledge, that there's a bridge also being created between the PC ordinance and the G2G Act. Next, please. Must be interesting for you because Maqbool Sahab was talking about the history of ICAP, members of ICAP. Let me share the history of privatization as well. 1950s had a different model of privatization. PIDC used to establish industrial unit, and after making them profitable, they were given to the private sector. So a different model, that government was making an entity, making it profitable, and then giving it to the private sector. Then comes the 70s, entire reverse of it. We got into nationalization till 1977, and in 1978, transfer of managed establishment order was issued, or you can say the privatization ordinance of that time. Before that, the entire process was reversed and nationalization was carried out. 1980s, it was Muhammad Khan Junejo regime which first established the Cabinet Disinvestment Committee to identify loss-making units to be privatized. I think most of you must be familiar with Dr. Ishrat Hussain report or Tri-Age report, but this goes back 4 decades. We were already there working on identifying of loss-making SOEs, which most of the people don't know. Then 90s was the time when actually, privatization came a priority for the economic agenda. Next, please. A surprise for you. We in Pakistan have concluded 179 privatization transactions. People talk about, privatization is possible or not, but we have concluded 179 transactions, and we have been able to generate around 650, rounding off 650 billion rupees out of it. If you look closely into it, 60% of that 650 billion, that is 377 billion, came in the 5 years from November 2002 to November 2007. This was the time when the banks were being privatized, PTCL was privatized, and K Electric was privatized. So this was the time when actual, the maximum aggressive approach was being adopted towards the privatization. Then was from June 2013 till May 2018, when again 173 billion was generated from privatization. Though few people argue that these were not actual privatization, they was capital market transaction, fair enough, but as per the PC ordinance, they were the privatization proceeds from sale of share of SOEs, so they will also count towards the privatization. But again, if you see the last couple of years, well, I was able to humbly contribute to all these transactions from August 2010, but the revenue has not been that, what we would expecting to generate from the privatization. Next, please. Just to give you a crowded slide, but just to give you an idea what when we talk about the privatization, what exactly privatization includes. It starts with the CCOP approval for privatization, Cabinet ratifies that decision, FA is appointed by the Privatization Commission, the FA carries out the due diligence which covers financial, technical, legal and 3D and 4D aspects. Then the EOIs are called, the roadshows are conducted, EOIs are received, request for statement of qualification is issued, the statement of qualifications are received, pre-qualified from buyer side, virtual data room is open so they can do their diligence. Pre-bid conferences are held, valuation is carried out by the transaction committee considered by PC board, and then valuation is approved, reserve value is approved by CCOP, and then earnest money is received and bidding is held. A very simple slide as it appears to be, but very complicated. If I get into detail of every box of it, I tell you it has got so much of complication and so much of depth is involved in it that, we have seen that all this process has taken sometime around 18 months to 24 months, and still many transactions could not make to that last box. 3 boxes I would like to highlight which are very important. First is the due diligence which is carried on the behalf of government, the seller side due diligence. Number 2 is the extreme right box, middle box, that is the road shows. We are not conducting the road shows the way we could be conducting. I think in the next section, Asfar Saab might be talking about this, that how effective we have to be road shows. Do we have to rely only on the financial advisors to carry out those road shows? Or why we have got so much of, these trade and commercial officers appointed in every embassy of Pakistan abroad? Do they also have a role on it? Do they have the access to trade and commercial offices over here? Why not that access is provided to these privatization commission and administrative ministries so that we could have effective investor roadshows? The third box is obviously finance people love valuation. Because when you are in that boardroom, when you are in that cabinet committee meeting, I tell you, no one wants to take that responsibility of valuation. So let's appreciate the finance professional, that ultimately it's the finance professional who take the responsibility and say, I am okay with this DCF model, or I would propose this valuation for reserve value to be considered. Next, please. This is the active privatization list. Most of the names you know, but just to recap for you, real estate, we have got Services International Hotel, Jinnah Convention Center, Roosevelt, and many properties owned by different properties. Aviation, we know that, PI is so much in the news. In financial sector, Park Reinsurance, State Life, House Building, First Woman. Industrial sector is Sindh Energy Limited, Pakistan Engineering Company, and energy sector, the heaviest portfolio, 2 RLNG plant, 1 in Haveli, Badashah and Baloki, 1 is Gudu Power, Nandipur Power, and 10 discos, we know. All these are appearing on active privatization lists, I guess, for so many years. And so many attempts have been carried out, but again, right now, we have this list. Last week, there was a meeting held by DARSA where they have identified certain more entities. And yesterday also, Honorable Prime Minister has chaired a meeting where he has clearly mentioned that we have to update this list. And within this week, there was another important meeting chaired by the Finance Minister, who is chair of the Cabinet Committee on SOEs. He has also identified that we need to include more entities in this active privatization list. But this is the list which we have been trying to privatize, I don't know how many years. Next, please. Discos. We have selected only discos because, I can talk about all those entities, but because discos are mostly talked about what going good or bad. So I will be talking about, and I will leave the evaluation to you, how you see these transactions. The first attempt, or the first approval to privatize discos was approved by CCI in September 1993. More than 30 years back, CCI gave the approval, please privatize. And then a strategic plan was approved and WAPDA Act was amended, because at that time it was not unbundled, so WAPDA was having all this power sector, or power sector was WAPDA. The objective of privatization of power sector was, again the word was power sector, includes GTD, generation, transmission, distribution. It was not mentioning only the distribution. It was talking about privatization of GTD. And again, what was enhanced capital formation, improved sector efficiency, rationalized prices and subsidies. 31 years down the road, we still have those challenges. Rather, these challenges have amplified. Maybe if we could have privatized timely, we might have been able to resolve these issues the way the energy and economy is being drained right now, if we have taken the right decisions and sorted out these issues. Next, please. The first attempt to privatize was in 1998, and that was FESCO. Why it could not be privatized? Because the consent of lenders on loan agreements which were transferred from WAPDA to the balance sheet of FESCO, that consent was not available. And the tariff was not notified. I think it was the same year when NAPRA became operational, and it was one of the initial tariff which NAPRA gave, which was very unusual for power division. At that time, it was Ministry of Water and Power, that someone else is giving the tariff. So the tariff was being given by NAPRA at that time, but it was not notified by the government, or you can say Ministry of Water and Power. 5 years, please. 2003 PESCO, Societal Bank was an FA. Why it could not be completed? Because there was incomplete corporatization. Again, tariff was not being notified by the concerned ministry, which the regulator was saying. There were service jurisdiction issues between PESCO and tribal area. Now we have got TESCO, but at that time there were service jurisdiction issues. And then, very interestingly, the meters were not installed. The electricity was going directly to the household and industry, and the meters were not installed, and we were trying to privatize that entity. 2006, 3 years again, FESCO, very good response, 12 VOIs received, tariff still not notified. NAPRA has determined the tariff has not been notified by the government, and the title of assets was not in the name. You know the PTCL issue, so I'm not going to go into the detail. When you don't have the asset in your name, how can you privatize it? 3 years down the road, again FESCO. This time, I think it was Deutsche Bank was the financial advisor. They changed the transaction structure. They said instead of privatization, let's go for sale of shares. So they gave the transaction structure and offered 26% shares. Good response, but investors said after 1 year of successful operation and 1 year after post-privatization, we would like to take major stake. So we should be offered 25% stake again after 1 year. But in that famous meeting in Dubai, the concerned ministry refused to that proposal. Again, the transaction fizzled out. Then 5 years, there was no much movement. In 2014, again FESCO, LESCO, GEPCO, the better performing discos were selected. The bidding process of FESCO was at very advanced stage, but then we had got nationwide strike from WAPDA union. What happened? Again, the privatization process was stalled. Next, please. What we have been doing in the past 5 years, very recent 5 years. October 2018, privatization of discos again approved. Few months later, the task force was established by the government at that time. They said, let's first reform the discos and then offer for privatization. Hardly few months, Privatization Commission was directed that don't privatize, go for management contracts. Okay. In June, when management contracts were being discussed, the Power Division was directed to write to all provinces for provincialization of discos. Few months passed, a committee was constituted again to enhance the private sector participation. Fair enough. 3 months, 2 months down the road, another committee was established again to talk about the provincialization of discos. Then it was an election year, there was not much any activity done on the privatization, but now last Friday again discos have been put on the privatization list. So just take a pause for a while. If you are an investor, if you are a financial advisor, because I guess there are many practicing members over here, if you are a financial advisor for your investor, or if you are a senior official at a sovereign fund sitting in Middle East or in Singapore, how you see this slide? What tendencies you see in this slide? Maybe I'll leave it for the next session, which Azwar Saab and Nishan Saab would be doing. Next, please. Then comes, because we do in Competition Commission, we do seek these questions from union, stakeholders, and other organizations. When you are privatizing, there is a risk of monopoly created. But all these aspects have been clearly addressed in the respective laws, starting from the PC ordinance itself. The Section 5 requires PC to advise the federal government that monopolies are not created in the process of privatization. Then coming to the Competition Act, it has got many provisions, but just to highlight over here, that it aims to provide free competition in commercial activities, protect consumer from anti-competitive behaviors, debtor abuse of dominant position, prohibitive agreement, the famous Section 3 and 4, and then for every, even it's privatization, it's a merger or acquisition. We do consider, as per Section 11 of Competition Act, what approval we are giving, and we ensure what conditions we have to impose. That is regardless of SOE, that is regardless of any, whenever we see a merger acquisition is being taken, we see, and as per Section 11, we have got two options. First is that either we clear it in the first phase, or we do consider it, we see that there is a risk of lessening of competition, we do take it to the next phase. So we are well aware of it, but this is not something which Competition Commission does alone or can do alone. We look forward to the other regulators as well, because there are sector specific issues as well. For example, when the banks were being privatized, it was the responsibility of State Bank to ensure that the required regulatory framework exists and there are no monopoly created and new entrants are not being exposed to any predatory practices by the other banks. Just like if discos have to be privatized, we would be looking towards NAPRA, that NAPRA Act clearly says that they have to establish an open power market. And whenever it comes to us, we put our entire weight towards CTBCM, the opening of power sector. So when the privatization is being carried out, the laws are very clear and we are very clear in as far as our Competition Act is concerned, and we don't want to create monopolies, but the whole structure is something which we are very carefully look. And again, to give you the example of discos, now we are very carefully looking how the discos transaction would be structured by the Privatization Commission and Power Division. Whether they would be offering the retail business or wire business or both. Retail business is fine, but transmission business is a natural monopoly. So what conditions we would be imposing, that would depend on what transaction structure the process takes. Next please. Quickly, just to conclude, the lessons learned, why we want to privatize, what we want to privatize, how we want to privatize, and when we want to privatize. Very quickly, why to privatize? The privatization has to align with the economic growth trajectory. Identification of sector is very important. Capacity investment gaps has to be identified, and then the entities are selected. Again, I have to take a pause for a moment. What we are doing. This is something which is the global model. What we are doing is we are doing the reverse of it. We are selecting the entities, then we are evaluating the capacity and investment gaps, and then we are looking into the sector issues, and then we are saying this is our economic agenda. Regionally, we have seen in Far East, Middle East, that they were able to identify the tourism sector, health sector, oil and gas, and food sector, corporate farming, and then they opened it for privatization or liberalization. This is the flow, natural flow. Maybe we are doing the wrong way. Then what to privatize? I think the preliminary due diligence is very important. I've given you the example why we failed and we could not privatize. And now globally the economies are focusing on chips, robotics, which I think the president has also covered in his speech, and then the previous panel was also talking about IT, AI, so not getting into the details. Lastly, next please. It is very simple. Privatization Commission ordinance is so simple. It gives 6 modes. I'm not going to get into the detail, but you can opt any of these models. And when to privatize, because right now government wants to launch the bonds as well. So when you are launching sovereign bond, don't launch it along with the big ticket size transaction, because the investor will go for lesser risk transaction and it might hurt your privatization index. Then is the economic conditions. For example, at this high policy rate, First Women Bank and house building finance might not be privatized. Then the balance sheet, obviously when you have got high receivable, payable. So just to wrap it up, this is something we have to be very clear that what we owe to the next generation of our country. We owe economic prosperity to us. Are these privatization challenges specific to Pakistan? No. Have other countries solved those challenges? Yes. What they did different was they planned and executed best. We have failed to plan and execute it well. And failing to plan is planning to fail. And failure is no longer an option, neither for this economy nor for this nation. I thank you all.
Salman, please stay on stage, right?